When empathy becomes your identity and your burden, not all light is pure, Carl Jung. You feel everything, the subtle shift in a room, the weight behind someone's smile, the pain that nobody speaks of, but somehow you still carry, and because you feel it so deeply, you start believing it's your responsibility to fix it. But here's the unspoken truth Carl Jung would want you to hear. When you become the light for everyone else, you often forget to turn it inward. You've been praised for being so understanding. You've been admired for your kindness. You've been told how strong you are. But when the lights go down, and no one needs saving, you feel empty, exhausted, invisible, because when your identity becomes being the one who feels everything, you start losing the parts of you that need feeling too. The empath isn't born, they're formed. Carl Jung said, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. And for many empaths, that acceptance never happened. Not because they didn't want it, but because the world around them didn't make space for it. Empaths are often born from chaos, not in the mystical sense, but in the emotional one. Maybe your childhood taught you to read moods like maps. Maybe you had to soothe an angry parent before they exploded. Maybe you were praised only when you were quiet, helpful, or emotionally available. So you learned to abandon your own needs, to tune into the room, to keep the peace, even at your own expense. That's not empathy, that's survival. And survival becomes your personality, the mask of the good one. In Jungian psychology, there's a concept called the persona, the social mask we wear to survive. As an empath, your persona becomes the good one, the kind one, the giver, the peacekeeper, the one who says, I'm fine, even when your soul is unraveling. This mask is not fake. It's a coping mechanism. But here's the tragedy. The more tightly you wear it, the more you forget who you are beneath it. You start to confuse empathy with identity. You think your value comes from how much you carry for others. You think love means absorbing pain so no one else has to feel it. And without realizing it, your light becomes a prison. The burnout no one talks about. You feel drained, but can't explain why. You feel anxious, but blame yourself. You feel resentment, but then guilt for feeling it. You give, and then hate yourself for feeling empty. Why? Because you were never taught to set limits. You were taught to be everything for everyone. And here's where Jung's warning comes in. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Most empaths believe they're just this way, that it's their destiny to always feel more, do more, be more. But what if that's not fate, but trauma dressed as virtue? The difference between empathy and enmeshment. Empathy is the ability to understand someone else's experience, but enmeshment is when you start confusing their feelings with your own. Jung would say this is where the shadow begins, the part of the self we deny or repress. Empaths often repress their own needs, own boundaries, and own pain. They fear being selfish. They fear being too much. They fear what might happen if they finally said no. So they say yes to everything, to everyone, until they disappear. And then they wonder why they feel so unseen. The truth beneath the light. Here's the truth. Your empathy was never the problem. It's the way you've been forced to use it that's hurting you. You don't have to carry everyone. You don't have to stay soft when you're breaking inside. You don't have to be the hero of someone else's healing story. Because sometimes empathy becomes a disguise, a way to stay busy with others so you don't have to face yourself. And that's where the shadow grows. You feel everything except your own pain. But what if your pain had something to teach you? What if the part of you that's tired of being the strong one is the part of you that needs the most love? Carl Jung didn't glorify light. He taught that wholeness requires embracing the dark, too, because until you face your shadow, your empathy will remain incomplete. The unseen shadow. When light attracts darkness, the brighter the light, the darker the shadow it casts. Carl Jung, you've been told your empathy is your gift, that your sensitivity makes the world softer, that your light is what heals others. But Jung warned us, where there is light, there must also be shadow. And what no one tells the empath is this: the more you shine, the more darkness you unconsciously attract. The law of emotional gravity. Empaths are magnets, not because they seek pain, but because their light signals a kind of safety. To the broken, to the manipulative, to the emotionally unavailable. You don't mean to attract them, but you do, because the part of you that wants to heal them doesn't see the part of you that still needs healing too. It's not your fault, but it's also not fate. Carl Jung would say it's your shadow at work. What is the shadow? The shadow is everything you suppress or deny about yourself. Your anger, your resentment, your desire to say enough. It's the voice that says, you don't always want to be the nice one. You're tired of pretending you're okay. You wish someone would finally take care of you. But you push those feelings away because being the light is safer. Because you were never taught to hold your own darkness. And that's the danger. People will do anything, no matter how absurd, Jung wrote, to avoid facing their own souls. So, instead of facing your own shadow, you attract others who embody it for you. Empath-narcissist dynamics, a mirror of wounds. There's a reason empaths often find themselves in toxic cycles. The narcissist presents what the empath represses: ego, self-focus, dominance, entitlement. And the empath presents what the narcissist lacks: emotional attunement, humility, softness. But here's the catch. It feels like chemistry, because both people are unconsciously trying to complete themselves through the other. Jung would say this isn't love, it's projection. You see the wounded child inside them, because you haven't yet rescued the wounded child inside yourself. I can fix them. The shadow of the healer. You believe that if you just love them enough, they'll change, they'll grow, they'll soften. But deep down, you're not just healing them, you're trying to heal you. The child who was never heard, the teen who never felt seen, the adult who was taught that love means self-sacrifice. And every time you stay too long, you reinforce the belief that love must hurt to be real. This is how the empath's light becomes a lure, and how empathy becomes a form of self-abandonment. Why you ignore red flags and call it understanding. You see the best in people. You look past the anger, the neglect, the chaos, because you know there's pain underneath. But understanding someone's trauma is not a reason to tolerate their mistreatment. And the part of you that keeps giving chances, that keeps justifying behavior, that keeps rewriting your own needs, that's not compassion. That's your unconscious shadow demanding to be acknowledged. Your shadow isn't evil, it's honest. Most people think the shadow is where your demons live, but Jung saw it differently. The shadow is not bad. It's simply the parts of you you've disowned. It's your assertiveness, your right to rest, your need for boundaries, your permission to walk away. And when you ignore your own shadow, you unconsciously let others act it out on you. That's the empath's paradox. You think you're the light, but you've simply made peace with being consumed. You don't deserve to be the mirror for everyone else's darkness. You were not born to be a dumping ground for pain. You were not created to carry other people's brokenness. Yes, your presence is healing. Yes, your love is rare. Yes, your intuition is powerful, but not when it comes at the cost of your truth. Jung taught that true healing only begins when you stop identifying with your mask and start reclaiming what you've hidden in your depths. And for the empath, that often means facing your own rage, exhaustion, and loneliness, not to get rid of it, but to finally listen to it. Your shadow is not your enemy, it's your invitation to wholeness. And maybe, just maybe, your empathy was never meant to save others. Maybe it was always meant to lead you back to yourself. The empath's awakening, meeting the rejected self. You cannot become whole by staying in half of yourself. Inspired by Carl Jung, something cracks. It might be subtle at first, a breakdown in a conversation, a moment of silence that cuts to deep, a betrayal you never thought you'd experience. And suddenly, you're not just tired, you're undone. You realize you've been holding up the world for everyone else. But no one has ever noticed when you were the one slipping. That's not weakness. That's your awakening. When the mask cracks, Every empath eventually reaches this moment, the collapse of the identity they spent their life perfecting. It doesn't happen because you failed. It happens because you've finally outgrown the role of the rescuer. Carl Jung called this moment a confrontation with the shadow. It's when the parts of yourself you've denied for years, anger, fear, desire, boundaries, rise from the basement of your unconscious and demand to be seen, not gently, but with fire. It feels like you're falling apart, but you're not falling apart. You're falling inward. Emotional burnout is a spiritual alarm. What we call burnout, you might call a soul signal. The ego says, keep going. The shadow says, stop pretending. The soul says, come home. This moment of collapse, when you feel lost, used, invisible, is the first time you're finally forced to ask, what about me? And that's where the inner conflict begins, because the part of you that's been trained to serve, soothe, and stay small doesn't know what to do with that question. You've never let yourself be your own responsibility. But now the part of you you've rejected, the one who's messy, loud, angry, unapologetic, starts to whisper, let me speak, reclaiming the shadow, the parts of you that were never bad. Jung taught that the shadow isn't evil. It's unintegrated. It's the strength you were told was selfish, the tears you weren't allowed to cry, the opinions you silenced to avoid conflict, the dreams you buried to avoid being too much. The empath's awakening is not about becoming cold. It's about becoming whole. And to be whole, you must meet the parts of you were trained to abandon, the inner child still waiting to be chosen. So many empaths were parentified, emotionally responsible before they were ready. You felt guilt for having needs. You found safety in self-sacrifice. But inside you still lives a child, not the magical, perfect child, the real one, the one who wasn't allowed to be messy, the one who needed someone to ask, what do you feel? Not to fix it, not to analyze it, just to witness it. And now that role is yours. You are the one you've been waiting for. Individuation, becoming who you really are. Jung called the process of integrating all aspects of the self individuation. It's the opposite of people-pleasing. It's the end of self-erasure. It's when you stop being the light for others and start becoming the light that arises from within. The empath doesn't lose their gift through individuation. They refine it, they anchor it, they stop bleeding for love and start offering presence from a place of power, because they've finally seen, the only person I needed to rescue was myself. How healing actually feels. It's not always peaceful. Sometimes it's rage. Sometimes it's grief. Sometimes it's walking away from people you thought you'd love forever. But beneath the pain is something truer than you've ever known. I'm allowed to take up space. I don't have to carry everyone. My emotions are not a burden. My boundaries are not cruelty. My empathy includes me. This is what it means to meet your rejected self. Not to change them, but to say, you belong here too. Wholeness is not perfection. It's honesty. You felt everything for everyone else. Now it's time to feel your way back home to you. Real empathy requires wholeness. Jung's final warning. You are not just a light. You are the whole flame. You've always believed empathy was about giving, about feeling what others can't, about showing up even when no one else does. But Carl Jung taught something deeper. Something that most empaths never hear. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. And so, you've mistaken overgiving for destiny, people-pleasing for compassion, pain for purpose. But you're waking up now. You're starting to see it. Real empathy doesn't drain you. It grounds you. It honors you as much as it honors others. It doesn't ask you to abandon yourself. It requires you to include yourself. The empowered empath, no longer a martyr. Once you stop confusing your worth with how much you carry, something radical happens. You say no and mean it. You walk away without guilt. You rest without apology. You stop explaining your intuition. You stop softening truth so others feel comfortable. You no longer chase people who can't meet you, because you finally met yourself. You no longer tolerate those who confuse love with control. because you've chosen your peace over their validation. You are no longer a sponge. You're a mirror. You reflect, you don't absorb. From savior to safe space, you don't need to fix anyone anymore. You simply hold space. You stay whole. You let others rise or fall, not from coldness, but from wisdom. This is what Jung would call individuation in motion. You are no longer split, no longer the good one who secretly resents being used, no longer the strong one who silently suffers. You are soft and strong, vulnerable and wise, loving and boundaried. You are not just empathy, you are truth, the self, wholeness beyond the persona. In Jungian psychology, the goal isn't to be good, it's to be whole. The self, in Jung's terms, is not just the ego or the mask. It's the totality of who you are, light and dark, conscious and unconscious, past wounds and present strength. The self is not perfection, it is integration. And when you arrive here, when you hold both your tenderness and your truth, you finally stop living in extremes. You are no longer the empath who disappears into others. You are the soul who returns to themselves. Empathy after awakening. Empathy, once you've integrated your shadow, becomes clearer, cleaner, stronger. You stop rescuing people who don't want to change. You stop losing sleep over situations that were never yours to fix. You stop mistaking chaos for connection, because now you are not waiting for someone to choose you. You've already chosen yourself. Your presence becomes magnetic, not because you give more, but because your boundaries speak louder than your words. You no longer need to explain your worth. You embody it. True empathy is forged in wholeness, not in martyrdom. You've always had a powerful heart, but now you've matched it with a powerful spine. That is the empath's evolution. That is the gift of the shadow. If this spoke to something deep inside you, know this: you are not broken. You are becoming whole. Carl Jung said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. So let your light shine, but let it come from a place of truth, not performance. And if you're on this path of awakening, of reclaiming yourself from the roles you've been forced to play, then this channel is for you. Subscribe if you haven't already. I make videos like this every week. Comment below. I reclaim my shadow if this resonated. And don't forget to hit the notification bell, because your journey to wholeness is just beginning.